today we have two guests, Anita Bhogle and Aditi Dugar.
I learned very early in life that hard work can also teach you a lot of other values.
Somewhere down the line, we decided to be on our own and marry our skills. And then we started this motivational series called The Winning Way.
In WLC, when I meet women from all across walks, I find that nobody's had a linear career path.
So many couples that we know, the husband eventually became a CEO, but the wife either was on her own or her career plateaued somewhere, or some people even gave up.
Are we equal? We're certainly, and this is not just for India, I think this is worldwide. Harvard Business School did a study and they found that 10 years out, the women of the graduating class, 10 years later, just about 10% end up working.
Part of starting WLC was because of my own lack of not having mentors early on, while of course always great role models.
You obviously started Sage and Saffron, then you had Masque, now you've got 27 Bakehouse. I know you have a lot of future plans. How are you kind of going to stay the course in terms of fundraising?
I think women want everything proper in their businesses before they raise capital. They want a full structure, they want audited balance sheet. Men raise capital on paper.
Right.
There's a leadership team, and that has changed the whole idea of from me to us.
I think nothing is rocket science.
I love that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It used to be publish or perish. Now, hardly anybody's publishing because everybody's publishing, right? Everybody's a journalist, everybody's a, exactly.
I think, guilt is universal for women.
The men are always afraid of hiring smarter people,
In my book, diplomacy is not a bad thing since I am the product of that.
Welcome to Circle. Today we are exploring stories of personal stories and how personal stories influence success and leadership. And with us today we have two guests, Anita Bhogle and Aditi Dugar. They both are from very different industries, and hence we wanted to kind of bring this different mix. Anita ma'am has written a book called Equal Yet Different. It's one of the bestsellers, and she's a thought leader on diversity and equity. Aditi has, of course, this beautiful restaurant where we are at. It's called Masque. And it's changed the scene on fine dining. I think it's one of the best, among the top 2 or 3 best restaurants in the country. And we would love to know more about that. So over to you.
We are all inclusive, so no ma'am. You're all on personality, first name terms.
Thank you, Aditi and Anita, for joining Jaya and I today. Before we get into your professional successes and journeys, we'd love to learn a little bit more about your personal stories, just, your childhood, your early years, and how that impacted the person you both became today. So perhaps we can start with you, Anita.
Okay. I had a pretty normal kind of childhood. But I think as I grew older, I realized that we had more sheltered and protected kind of a life than most people. My father was a police officer. And so, it was a little more sheltered, I guess. And I think I'm a few years older than you. So in our time, people used to be okay with, if a girl did something like a career, it was nice. But if she didn't, it was still okay, But I had I was very good at academics, and so there was no pressure from home to achieve something, but I was a very self-motivated kind of a person. So as I grew older, I kind of, tried to find out about different courses and different things. And my father being in the government didn't really kind of, get into all these things, and most of the decisions were mine. So being self-motivated, I think, in a way, became my hallmark. And since I've been self-employed for a very long part of my career, I think it came in handy.
So your parents, obviously, they may not have pushed you to necessarily have a career per se, but obviously they gave you the tools to be independent and to be that self-starter.
Yeah, so they were very supportive, but not really ambitious. Today's parents are far more ambitious, they want their children, they know and they find out and get involved and things like that. It wasn't like that, and I'm not holding it against them. I'm just saying how times were a little different. They also grew up in smaller towns, and so they didn't have the exposure. I was in Mumbai most of the time.
And just before we move on to Aditi, we know that you were one of the just a handful of women who went to one of the most prestigious institutes, higher educational institutes in India. So you were the self-starter, but how do you go from an IIT to an IIM with just your, I mean, tell us about that at a time period when hardly any women were in those educational institutions.
Yeah, so it seems like a smooth ride, but I wanted to go to IIT right after my 10th. But my father said, with his limited understanding of engineering, first thing he said was, you were too young. And Powai was really way, way off from South Mumbai where we lived. And the second thing he said was that, I don't have the money to set up any factory or something like that for you. And so you might end up in the PWD, which was where all the government engineers were.
Public Works Department.
Yeah, and in those days, kids listen to their parents, so that was a non-starter. And then I did maths, which was my first love anyway. But eventually I went to IIT, but I did a post-graduation in statistics. I did do engineering, but I got the Hawa. From IIT, yes. And there I met a professor, Professor Subhash Babu, who somehow took to me. I was doing a project with him, and he asked me, why you're not appearing for the CAT? You should be able to do it. You will get through. So sometimes in life, that is all you require, somebody who just gives you that little nudge, that little push. And he helped me, fill the forms and things like that. And I realized how ignorant I was. I only appeared for IIM Ahmedabad, not for Bangalore, for Calcutta. And it seems so foolish now, but that's how it was. And one thing led to another. But again, it was all my doing and my this thing with help from another professor.
Thank you. So we will come back to IIM Ahmedabad. But Aditi, tell us about yourself and your early years.
So I grew up in a large joint family. We were like 10 or 12 first cousins living under the same roof. And I was the youngest daughter in the house. I had only one older cousin who also moved away to Jaipur. So I was the only girl living with so many boys under one roof. So I was pretty boisterous. And I think I am till today, even when I'm hanging with my friends, it's like, oh yeah, you're one of the boys, and that's how... So it's been, and it was very competitive. Like growing up with so many boys, it was always, being competitive, fighting for everything. Like I was always over pampered by my grandparents, so very sheltered and protected. And my sister came along 10 years, she's 10 years younger. So she really had it very easy. So yeah, I was very over pampered, over protective. My parents didn't send me abroad to study. My brother went abroad, my sister went abroad. They kept me really close to them. And I think it was the same, even for my mom's side of family, because she was the oldest sibling amongst her
generation.
Her generation. And even on my Nana's side, my mom was the oldest child. So my brother was the first grandchild in the house. So he was always given that extra attention. And, my Nana loved horses and animals. We had literally a cow in the bungalow that they lived in Pali Hills. So every day, we'd be getting fresh milk from the udder, and he would over pamper my brother about everything, take him horse riding, but let me sleep. So it was always this thing that where I really wanted to prove something, and fight back. And but there was. It was I was very loved. I was very over pampered. I would shed a single tear, and I would get the work done. So I kind of learned the tricks of the trade very early, but also made me very competitive. I wanted to prove something constantly to say that hey, I'm not just tiny and a girl, but I can do better. My brother he's gifted. He's really bright, and he was always he barely had to study. I always had to do the hard work to get the grades. So he got it very easy, but I learned very early in life that, hard work can also teach you a lot of other values of, being, resilient and, accepting failures. And I think that I've got the better side of the coin.
And that's such a beautiful story that on one side you had so much support and love and family, and the other side there was less expected of you.
Yeah.
But of course, you were surrounded by so many family members and so many brothers, so you became very competitive. When you were building Masque, how did all of this shape you?
So again, like Masque was very accidental because I went on to study. I did my CFA and I was going abroad and I realized that I was pregnant. So life took a full U-turn and now I'm mother of 3 kids. So I quit a career in finance, and when my middle one was 2 years old, I was spending a lot of time with my mom. I was very dependent. I was a young mother, so I was very dependent on my parents. And she used to do cooking classes at home. And, I think that it runs in my DNA. Like, I love food. And my mom and grandmother's kitchens have always inspired me. My nani till date sets the most beautiful tables, the way she cuts the cutlery, even without a ruler, like everything, the accuracy in the kitchen is crazy. So it's always like, it's been a part of my journey and who I am. And I'm also very OCD about, doing things with perfection. And so it came very naturally to me, and I started helping my mom professionalize her setup because it really bothered me. It was a very mom and pop shop, the way she would run her setup. And to only realize that I love food. So I started a catering business with my mom 12 years ago called Sage and Saffron. And again, we were catering to a very niche market. It was a vegetarian catering company. But I think I brought that, as a young entrepreneur, brought that 360 aspect to the brand, where I would, set up the table. I'd be very excited to go beyond what the client was expecting. And I think that just word of mouth, we were lucky enough at that time. Like, vegetarian food was so uninspiring outside of people's homes. It was the right time, right moment. And then Masque came along 8 years ago because I was fortunate that, I had all this global exposure. We were always traveling. We have a lot of family that lives in the UK. So we had a more global sense of what was going on internationally. And I realized there was a big gap in the Indian fine dining space. And actually, Masque was a space where I'd taken up for my Sage and Saffron commissary, which later converted the idea to becoming a restaurant.
I've always wondered, why is it always maa ke haath ka khana? And then all the chefs and the restaurant owners are all men.
Yeah, very good question. Maybe that's the subject of your next book, Anita. But going back to you, you had this professor at IIT who sort of pushed you to apply to IIM Ahmedabad. You got in and you went. I believe you were one of 9 women.
9 out of 180.
9 out of 180 women, 180 men in your class. And so what did you end up doing, after IIM Ahmedabad? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
So, 2 things I did. One is I joined advertising. And second thing, I got married to a batchmate. So two ticks.
Two happy endings.
Yes, happening over there. And we thought, that we would have these regular corporate careers. And I was already 24, so the next few years I had 2 kids. And the career continued. I didn't have much help in Mumbai.
With child rearing.
In-laws, siblings, nobody was there, to kind of support the career. So a lot of times I worked flexi time or, part-time and things like that.
At a time when flexi time was unheard of.
Yeah. So initially I did work full-time and then flexi time. And then my husband's career took a turn. So he quit corporate life and became a commentator. And that meant that he was away for like two months at a time, 2.5 months. Tours can be really long, and they used to be longer in those days. Yeah. And then the kids were there, and they were not going to grow up in a hurry. So I was in advertising and had already become the head of a department. And I was working part-time. And we had 7 offices in India. And how long was I going to say, I can't travel, I can't do this, I can't attend workshops and things like that. They were very sweet about it. They didn't say anything. They knew the background and they had hired me knowing it. But still somewhere, I felt very restless. And then my husband and I decided to kind of, pool in our skills And so he came from, he had a ringside view of sport, and I had a lot of knowledge of brands. So somewhere down the line, because I'd done a lot of market research and things like that, also in trying to, keep it going, whatever was possible. In fact, I'm a quant person, MSc statistics, but I did qualitative research because that was more manageable. We didn't have computers in those days and, all kinds of difficulties, but kept it going. And then somewhere down the line, we decided to be on our own and, marry our skills. And then we started this motivational series called The Winning Way. And it's still running. It's 25 years old now.
Wow.
And that's how I wrote a book based on that and things like that. That's how it went. So strange things happened. I've done other things also down the line, but to answer your question in short.
Yeah, so you went from a corporate setup to self-employment.
Self-employment.
Which you've been
And
doing.
then I had a little startup when I was 50. It was called Biz Pundits, where I used to interview industry leaders. It was a video learning library for managers, and I sold it before COVID to an edtech platform.
So when you were talking about your multiple pivots, and in WLC, when I meet women from all across walks, I find that nobody's had a linear career path. We all take pivots, especially becoming self-employed. Gayatri has done that. I've done that. You've done that. I think Aditi, in her own way, kind of manages her career in a way that she has support of her family. How did all of these journeys and pivots for you define the book you wrote? What were you trying to achieve through that book?
I read Lean In at about when I was 50. And I thought, somebody should have told us this before.
Sheryl Sandberg's book.
Sheryl Sandberg's book.
It's an amazing book.
Then I realized, although the first impression was, wow, like this is great. And then I thought, many of these things don't work for us in
Correct.
India.
Yes.
Because we have a lot more people and a lot more voices meddling in. And many of the things like, the family structures and stuff like that are different. So that was one thought. And I had watched batchmates, so many couples that we know. The husband eventually became a CEO, but the wife either was on her own or, her career plateaued somewhere, or some people even gave up. And this was a disturbing kind of a thought, and we've always wondered why we don't have enough women leaders. I had also done a lot of work on The Winning Way. And, when we started, there were very few women in the audience. And there were very few women doing well in sport as well. But as the country changed and, the economy developed and sport also developed, we have women in all kinds of sports and absolute world champions. And the number of women in the audience also increased. And they somehow seemed to say that, or kind of suggested that what the winning formula we were suggesting for men, was it entirely applicable to women? And then I also started, thinking about that. Is there something more? Is there something different that women required? So in a way, the starting point was, should there be a winning way for women? And that eventually became equally different.
So, Anita, I actually have a question on the title of your book, Equal but Different. Are we equal? I mean, we're certainly, and this is not just for India, I think this is worldwide. What is your answer to that question?
We are not, but I think all women would like to be treated like that, equally yet differently. And I feel we are equal on ability, equal on ambition, like she said.
Yes.
But we have our own challenges and we have our own conditioning that we have to live with. I'm sure, the way her Nana treated her, pampered her, but protected her, somewhere in her psyche that must be there. It comes up sometime or the other. It's for most women, yeah. We are always told, be careful. Are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure? So that comes up.
You also touched upon the fact that you reflected a lot on what you could have done differently. Please share with us what you think you could have done differently, or would have maybe may have taken, maybe there was a juncture, a fork in the road, and you took one way, but you may have taken another. And if you look back, I mean, I know 2020 hindsight, one can say, I should have done this, I should have done that.
Yeah.
But if you had to do things differently,
I thought about it. There was no support. I couldn't have asked people to move. my husband's career was like, it was a 1 in a billion kind of a chance.
Thriving.
And so, yeah. So that had to be taken for the family. And that's not something we regret because we've all enjoyed the success. So nothing really. I'd already had my children, and I don't think I regret that at any point in time. So I couldn't have done anything very differently. So not ask for more help or anything like that. Maybe I could have asked for the favor in return from my husband saying, you know, I took the back seat, now it's time for you. But that never happened.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's what happens, right? Sometime when one side of the career takes off, the other sacrifices their ambition. And I don't know if there's any answer to this complicated question.
I don't think it's one answer for anybody
Yeah,
because it all depends on you.
Yeah.
It depends on your family situation.
And I think this is a worldwide problem. Harvard Business School did a study, and they found that 10 years out, the women of the graduating class, 10 years later, just about 10% end up working. Because childcare, child rearing is such an integral part of our lives, and we do not get social support. Maybe some advanced European countries offer social support, in terms of childcare. But most societies, the burden does fall on women. So if your career graph coincides with your childbearing years, right? So that's where the big problem comes in. And that's why I think, Aditi, your story is so fascinating, because not only did you manage to build a successful career in food, and which, by the way, is such a challenging industry to be in, but you also did it while raising, your boys are still quite young, if I understand correctly. So how did you manage those sorts of pushes and pulls?
I think that, I don't think, I'm very lucky. I don't think everybody is so fortunate to have that kind of support system and family support. It was from all sides. It was, my husband, who's an equal in every part of the way of raising the kids, whether it was, I didn't give a bottle to any of my kids, even while opening Masque, and I breastfed all of them. And I wanted to, it was that guilt, right? Like as a young mother, you're always guilty. So I always wanted to overcompensate with everything. Like they were traveling with me everywhere I went, whether it was trips for work or like the kids went everywhere. But I had that support, and I'm very fortunate, whether it was my in-laws or my parents or my husband. Until date, they're always there as a helping hand. And even with my friends, like I have built that. And I think that it's also come because I never shied away from asking for help. I always leaned on that support system. Even if I was crumbling, I was just hand over my kids to my parents. Yeah. And it was very challenging because when I opened Masque, my third one was born 2 days before. I went into preterm labor. I had preeclampsia because I had high blood pressure with the stress of opening this high pressure restaurant where everybody was doubting me and I was going to fail. And anyone I consulted, they're like, you're crazy to open this restaurant in India. Like you're just burning your... burning away the money that's been given to you. And it was this whole stress of that, the guilt that, it's like you borrowed money from my in-laws and husband and I don't know what I'm going to do with it. So, and so I went into preterm labor and I was actually in lockdown. My parents literally put me in lockdown. My blood pressure shot through the roof. For 3 months, I didn't come to this restaurant. So Aditya was handling it for the first 3 months. And it was a lot of guilt. I remember in the hospital crying for days. My friends would come and they'd be like, serves you right. You think, in a joke. They were just joking with me. But you really think you can do it all. But, maybe this is God's way of saying that, you need to slow down. But it was very hard because I think going to that low and then again trying to come back on top. When I came into this restaurant that I had dreamt and built, I was, almost a stranger into my own project in the beginning. So it was very hard to, deal with that in the beginning. And when Arabi was 5 months old, I literally went to the gynac and I said, listen, I need to do something so extreme because I'm literally at the lowest in my head that I've ever been. And I said, I'm taking my boy skiing alone. She said, he's 5 months old. He's like, premature. You can't do that. I said, no, that's like my mother's instinct. I'm going to do it. And and that changed, when I finally became myself and was allowed to do that. That changed in my head. I had that time, I can do the unthinkable. Wow. So I came back more powerful.
Wow, that's and so I mean, you touched upon this, which is this is such a deep-rooted emotion that you went through, and we talk about failure, but that was in that very low point, you still wanted to stay the course. That's really, I mean, shows grit, because many people would just say, you know what, I really can't do this. To your friend's point, sure they were joking, but I'm sure it hit home, right? It's like God's way, and then you think, oh my God, what am I doing? How did you? I mean, what kind of pushed you, Aditi, to continue?
It's really, I think I have this FOMO. even now, it's 11 o'clock and there'll be somebody who call me for a movie plan and I'm like half dead, but I'll still make it to that plan. I may sleep through the movie, but I'm there because there's this fear of missing out.
And so with Masque, you felt, I mean, I'm going to do this because you were pioneering a new category. So how were you missing out? You hadn't even created it. You didn't.
No, but I was missing out on all the moments of people coming in and being amazed at what this restaurant was doing to the landscape, the restaurant landscape as well.
So there's FOMO at home and FOMO at work. And you're always guilty. I have a whole chapter in my book.
Yeah. And Aditi, going back to this, you said that when there was a lot of doubt around that you're really burning money and and you were called crazy.
Yeah.
And in spite of that, handling the third childbirth, being called crazy, what was inside of you that kind of still find the fight, the grit? What was happening that you could come back to fight another day?
I think the amazing mentors I have in my life, and I think, Vijay, who is also known to you, Gayatri, I worked with him for the first 5 years. I built a career in finance working under him. And I think just also how everybody, growing up in a big family, the love and attention and the support you have it's crazy, right? And I just started looking inwards a lot, and they were all there for me through everything, and everybody wanted to, be part of this success, whether even it's my kids today, that they, they'll go that extra mile. Like my oldest one, he looks after the house. Once, it's crazy, he was only 12, and, my sister started Zama Organics during this journey of building Masque. She also got very inspired, and she came back from college and started Zama. And my son is a big foodie, and he's constantly getting bugged that there wasn't some ingredients at home, and he couldn't order the star because it was the lack of ingredients, because I had failed to order it. So he said to the staff, can you add me on that group, on the ordering group? And he was only 12. Wow. And so my sister was just like, what, Arjun, what are you doing on this group? He said, I think I'm the man of the house. My mom's always missing. And I don't want to put pressure on her, so I'll take on this responsibility of ordering the vegetables. And he still does. He takes on simple tasks at home. And it's really everybody's been so part and invested in this journey that it's really got me to the top.
Anita, what about you? Did you have a mentor or mentors to guide you?
Not really, because I've been, on my own for a very, very long time. But I did learn from observation, just watching other people in action. And there's a story I've put in my book, which is, I had a boss when I was in advertising. And, I'm the kind of person who calls a spade a spade. So I wouldn't mince words. So if something is not good, I'd just say it doesn't work or it's not good enough. But I have watched that man in action, and he would always, when a campaign, as an advertising campaign was presented to him, he would say all the good things first. This is nice, this is nice, this is nice. And then he would just rip it apart and say, this doesn't work, this doesn't. So at the end of it, they had to go back. But then I realized that, the same team has to work on it. And so you can't demotivate them to such an extent that it's rejection. They have to go back and they have to work on it again. So small things like that, you learn as a leader and watching leaders and things like that, that this is what, it is. And similarly for mentors, I guess.
So I think both Jaya and I have had similar experiences where I don't necessarily think I had a mentor, but again, as you observe, as you said, you observe people's feedback mechanisms and things like that. And actually, our training modules, when I was a management consultant in the early part of my professional career, we were taught how to give feedback. So precisely to your point, always start with the soft, say all the good things and all that, and then you can destroy the person.
But
Yeah, correct. And that actually kind of, as you said, doesn't just, demotivate, but actually pushes the, the person to kind of do better.
Yeah.
So actually, the part of starting WLC was because my own lack of not having mentors early on. While of course, always great role models who taught attention to detail, they give you some strong values on integrity, but a direct mentor, the kind of support you feel. And of course, with WLC, we were kind enough that we got a mentor. Vivek is our mentor, and we of course have an advisory board, and you're part of the advisory board, and that kind of feels a huge support. And we want to, at WLC, do this, that all entrepreneurs get a mentor, and that's what we're building for next. But I know, Aditi, your journey is very different. You've had support and mentors in your life. So, of course, you had your mama as a direct mentor, but who are the other people who supported you, anchored you, when there are people calling you crazy? And so tell me, who were the mentors?
My dad, he's been a massive influence. Even till date, he's always giving me the right guidance. I think that very early on, even, also not taking me out of that shelf of that over-pampered by my nana and my nani and my mom. So he would really push me to even I had to take the local train to go to office. He'd make sure that I was able to, have a real check of what was going on in the world. And even till date, he's very invested in, how I run things, even while building this business, because I think hospitality, you can take a lot of wrong decisions. Money is easily available as well to borrow when you're building things in hospitality. But I think from the very beginning, he said, only do as much as you can chew. So, keep it all very official, take that initial capital, but build only if you're making profit. And, I don't want you to be in debt. I don't want you to be borrowing from anybody. I want you to feel that pressure of actually being profitable. And I think that's really gone a long way for me.
Of course, hospitality is such a tough business, but it's also exploded in urban India in a huge way. And now when you think about, you obviously started Sage and Saffron, then you had Masque, now you've got 27 Bakehouse. I know you have a lot of future plans. How do you kind of, so you're growing, but at the same time, you haven't taken outside capital. How are you kind of going to stay the course on in terms of fundraising?
I mean, we've pivoted a lot. I think that year on year, we've been showing internally 30 or 40% growth. The team has grown. Now we're nearly 220 people in the organization, starting from 2 people in the kitchen to 220 in 12 years. And it's all been with just bootstrapping it but showing that I think that also bringing the right team people on board, right? Who understand this vision that we're not just building restaurants, but we're creating a platform. We've put a lot of things in place the last 3 years, which is also a lot to do with Aditya really now working alongside with me in the business, is where, I'm focusing on the creativity and he's really focusing on the business growth, where every vertical is profitable. So there's no dependency. So we've put a lot of these, how you would run a corporate structure, but with heart. We've put ESOPs in place. We've put, all the health, all the insurances. We declare bonus every year. So we're putting us through that process to be prepared. We're in founder mode to go towards funding.
So do you and your husband work together?
So he's, of course, the family business he's a jeweler, but now I would say he's a full-time restaurateur.
So that's one thing I find interesting that, and I think you mentioned that when we were having a conversation, that women don't have access to funds, but actually sometimes I find that they have a reservation of actually raising funds. And I don't know if you've written about fundraising for women and access to capital, but I know that now you're going to start fundraising. What has stopped you from till now to raise capital?
Because I'm just too comfortable. Like, of course I have answerability towards the money, but it's, at the end of the day, I know what I'm making, so I can take those risks. I don't have to have that, my creativity doesn't need to be, the cords don't need to be cut because of, I can make decisions. If they're my mistakes, they're my mistakes. There's no answerability. There's answerability to my husband, but nothing beyond that. So that's the fear sometimes. But I think that, we're ready for that challenge. We've built the team that's ready for a challenge. And now it's not just about us, right? It's not about individual goals, but it's also like, now we're looking at like, where we want to take our people. Like, where can we take everybody along this journey? So there's the shift in mindset, and hence we're now ready.
So I love the shift in mindset.
Yeah.
And it's no more about just building something which is creative, but building a professional business which kind of can take scale. So when you start scaling up and start fundraising, what's the one thing that's kind of a self-doubt or fear that still kind of comes in your way, if it all comes?
I think that getting the wrong partner, right? Money is available, but getting the wrong partner is the fear, because this is built with so much love and passion. For someone to come and like change things and to do things differently is the fear. But I think if we get a strategic partner who understands and has patient capital, but understands the entrepreneurs and the people in this organization, I think we can go to a really new level.
But surely you've been wooed.
Yeah, a lot.
So I mean,
lot.
how do you deflect?
I mean, it's every meeting is a learning. Honestly, like we take back so much from every meeting, meeting wealth managers or PE funds or even private offices. It's been so much of a learning because we have been path correcting slowly as well, in small ways. We know who we need to hire or what we need to put in place. Like we get these ideas and we've realized that we want to maybe make these fixes first before we even
Take the plunge.
It's always
But
nice
it's
to know how
amazing.
the world looks at
Exactly.
you and your business.
Yeah. Exactly.
Anita, in the course of your research, what have you found in terms of women and fundraising? Women founders and women entrepreneurs and fundraising?
Yeah. So in 2018, we had the first get-together of IIMA women. And I thought, wow, this is like a really empowered group. But I was surprised to see that many of the problems were like similar. And, there was this lady who ran a VC fund, or she was part of it, I guess. And she said, because somebody said, why don't women get enough funding? In those days, it used to be 2-3%. Now I believe it's up to 10% or something like that. And that too with a lot of push. But she said, a lot of times the women themselves are responsible, because if you give them a 30-minute slot, everybody gets a 30-minute slot. The men want more time, and the women somehow just struggle to get to the 30-minute mark, because they just don't know how to kind of showcase their work. They don't know how to talk about it. They don't know how to stake a claim and say, I'm good, and, present their own credentials. So I think somewhere that conditioning also comes in the way.
So they hold themselves back from self-promotion and are diffident about their accomplishments.
Yeah, that belief is not there.
So something very interesting Aditi said, and when we were doing this workshop on money and fund venture capital, I think women want everything proper in their businesses before they raise capital. They want a full structure. They want audited balance sheet. It's not that women don't do, but men raise capital on paper.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas, look at her. She's happy to bootstrap. She has a business. She could have got funding maybe on the day she launched a restaurant. But this is what women do. Because of who we are internally, because of it's a high integrity, high process orientation, we don't want to kind of raise fund early on. That's a common theme we are seeing in WLC founders. It's not just access to capital, but they want to come in only when they've built a certain scale, a certain quality.
And they have the confidence
They
that
have
they'll
the
be able
confidence.
to
deliver. And accountability, right?
Accountability.
So being accountable to somebody who has given you in funding.
Yeah. So accountability and risk, right? I think this is changing, of course. We're taking more risk. She's taken risk. But I just want to know what's your relationship with risk right now, because now you've got to raise fund and you bootstrapped your way. But when you will take more funding, there'll be more risk involved.
I think I'm a huge risk taker. I mean, back in the days, I could buy 1 lakh shares on a day trade even. So I'm a huge risk taker when it comes to my own money, right? But because I'm great at poker. Like I'm very competitive. Like I'm great at gaming, but. And sometimes I look at my own company like that, like with that, in that lens as well. Like even if I'm taking a business risk, I know, what the downside or what the upside could be. Like even taking a huge commitment, even if something I've not done, like somebody gave me a challenge, can you execute a wedding end to end? It's something I've never done. But, putting myself in that situation, I know what the downside can be, but then the upside can be so much, like it can change the way things function in the company. So I have taken those risks all the time. But it's been because it's my own, I can take charge of my own money or of my own kind of my name, right? Yeah. Like it can either get destroyed or it can become. So I think that, but when you take external capital, I think sometimes that's the fear, like accountability, right? Yeah. And I think I was too early before to be in that place or in that situation, even though like we were doing amazingly, but it was too early. Like I didn't build enough of my own mentors in my own company. But now I'm at that stage where, everybody is leading a vertical. There's a leadership team. And that has changed the whole idea of from me to us,
Beautiful.
What is the one lesson that I would actually pose this to all of us, but what one lesson that you have sort of learned in this kind of growth mode? You also started a business, so I think we could, and you with WLC, of course, in this, because I'm sure there were challenges. Of course, you spoke about, your son being born premature, etc. Park that aside. But in terms of the professional journey specifically, was there, like something that really you learned in the last 12 years or 15 years?
I think I haven't slept enough and I've been too hard on myself.
Yeah.
And now I've learned from those mistakes. I'm okay to give responsibility and be okay for other people to make mistakes. I'd take everything too personally. I'd micromanage everything, every step of the way, be there at every catering, kill myself.
So delegation.
Delegation. Learn to delegate.
Yeah.
I think also learning to trust your team.
Yeah.
And
trust was always there, but it was just this, it's
being
in my business. I was
letting
guarding
go.
it too much.
Right. Anita, what about you? You also, you started your own business and, you've obviously interviewed so many. What is one takeaway?
Yeah, so most of my businesses came out of, or whatever I did, came out of, necessity or whatever I could manage at that point in time. So I always played to my strengths because there were many constraints. So then I focused on my strengths. So I just feel that if you're committed to excellence, and you have a learning mindset, you're willing to learn, because if you're venturing into something else, when I wrote Equally and Different, I'd never been in HR, didn't have anything to do with diversity and inclusion. But I think if you have these two things, commitment to excellence and a learning mindset, I think nothing is rocket science.
I love that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Jaya, what about you?
I think and when you start something like WLC, which is a network for women, and you're doing a very authentic one, early on, you don't take no's personally. I think it's made me very gritty. Every no is more fuel for me as bring it on. And I'm very comfortable being underestimated now. It kind of brings a cheer in my smile. Okay, lovely, one more person underestimating what we're trying to build. And I think, of course, also learning not to take the rejections personally. It's a redirection, because what's not happening, or somebody doesn't like what you're building or doesn't have faith in you, that means it's good. Something better is coming your way, and that's really held me in good stead. And I think building my mindset every day, I'm forever in a beginner's mindset. I think whenever we're building workshops and interventions, I'm like, I can also learn a little more about this. Most of my peers will say, you lead a workshop, and I will say, no, I think I can keep learning. So I think beginner's mindset, which is, I think I see a lot in today's women, and around everybody.
Everybody needs to be.
Yeah, that hunger to learn has really, and quick pivots, adaptability, agility. You know, we were not supposed to launch podcasts this year. We were supposed to launch something else completely. And there was this like an opportunity standing that this is what we will do first and we will do what we thought we a little later. And we just pivoted, right? So those constant pivots, because the opportunity is right in front of you if you keep your mind open. I think that's...
I think I completely agree. I think being nimble. I come from an industry which is, it's like, it used to be publish or perish. Now, I mean, hardly anybody's publishing because everybody's publishing, right? Everybody's a journalist. Everybody's a, they exactly. So I think being nimble, being able to pivot, and I sort of turn to somebody like a Karl Lagerfeld, who had such a thriving career up until the day he died, doing multiple fashion lines and all that. And what kept him going was curiosity. An avid reader, an avid learner, took up photography, simultaneously while he was designing, and constantly being curious. I think that's so important. And I think that's really echoing what all of you have just said.
And one of my favorite things about, I read this book, Born a Crime, Trevor Noah, and I think that the humor in all the crisis is what really...
It's as comic as it is tragic, isn't
exactly.
it?
Yeah. And as long as you can keep humoring yourself, even in the failures.
Yeah, everything. Every time somebody rejects you, have a little laugh about it.
Just take it as feedback.
Lightly. Yes, take it as feedback and take it lightly. I think you're right. Humor, and I think that's Gayatri's great mechanism.
I always try to keep them laughing.
Yeah, absolutely. In the last 10 years as a leadership coach, when I coach women and while building WLC, I've noticed that women careers are never linear, and we do a lot of pivots. And when I look at you, I look at this room, actually, including myself. We all chose to not take the normal career paths, and we ended up pivoting because there were challenges on the linear path. And I want to ask this question from you, Gayatri, and then maybe pose it to everybody here, that what made you take these pivots, what got hard for you, and what advice you have for others?
Right. So I've had multiple careers. I started off, as a very young college graduate as a management consultant. I was an equity research analyst with a huge, multinational corporate bank, all in the West, and also worked on budget and policy for the British government. So very checkered. And then I came to India, and I decided to become a journalist because, frankly, I found those corporate environments, large corporate financial environments, a bit exhausting. And I didn't necessarily see myself wanting to either become, the head of a department of equity research or, sort of a management consultant who's spending like 6 days a week on the road or whatever it is. I just could not envision myself doing that. And even in media, which of course the landscape has completely changed, the CEOs, the publishing side, the CEOs were always men taking the hard business decisions, and then that would impact editorial no matter whether you had the Chinese wall between editorial and business. So in a sense, becoming self-employed was really my only way to stay sane. Of course, it meant a huge, pay cut and challenges on that front because you are basic, living. You just don't know where the next gig is going to come from. I was fortunate to be able to manage that, but otherwise, it was, I just couldn't see where my career was going. And so I think for a lot of women, that kind of flexibility, which of course has become the norm after the pandemic, where people are, sort of doing different things and are able to do flexi time, which was not the norm pre-COVID. All of that has now changed the landscape. And I do think women can not just women, but men too, can take advantage of that new kind of normal.
Yes.
Though I'm not sure it is really the new normal because there is a lot of rethinking being done on, working from home and whether it really works, especially for senior people.
So I think it's kind of industry specific, Anita. I think that certain industries definitely lend themselves more to it and others, of course, not. And I think you're right. As you become quite senior, it does become harder to not come into the workplace. And I do think cultures have changed as a result. I learned a lot as a young person in these large organizations. And I really value those years because I learned so much. I don't know if as a young person today, if I was sitting at home and, not having those face-to-face interactions, if I would get that same kind of learning.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's unthinkable in our hospitality. You can't even have the choice to work from home. Even during COVID, like we had to pivot and be at work.
Yeah, yeah. And you have built a career completely in a male-dominated industry. And how did you kind of navigate that piece for yourself in terms of being such a male-dominated industry? The kitchen is not really safe for women. You work late nights. Your staff needs to work late nights. So how did you establish yourself in spite of being in a very male-dominated industry?
I mean, it was hard. It's been hard. I mean, I've been questioned multiple times. Been challenged by my own teammates. Always had to. It's been hard. I've had to navigate a lot in this industry. Also because there aren't many people. Like you don't have that support system that you can build or a community around with other people who are going through the same thing, right? Like I think in hospitality, it's much harder if you have a peer group, even other restaurateurs who are dealing with those same challenges. Of course, it's definitely changing. Now you see more female chefs, other female restaurateurs. You can bounce ideas, and I think that you can create that support system as well. But it's still, really you can count them on your fingers in India. Globally there is a larger community, but in India it's really still very few. So I think I've had to do it in-house. Like I've built a strong team that are in women-led in like high positions. Nobody could imagine a restaurant like Masque could have a female general manager, but we've put that in place. So I've built that within my own team.
Has it been hard to recruit women?
It has been, but then also like our recruiting style is not norm. It's not the norm. Like we're recruiting people who aren't even from the hospitality background, but who are, can align, can be passionate, are eager to learn, hungry. And we've kind of created our own system of training them.
Wow, lovely. I love what you just said, that you've created your own process on hiring, and they don't have to come from the same background, but they should have certain skills in them.
Yes.
And you're looking at that skill versus, and something I was seeing online also, that Elon Musk said that I early on made this mistake of looking only at the CV and the education, but then later on he pivoted to hire people for who they were. And I can hear from you the same thing, and post that question to you, that when you were researching for your book, women who could build careers in spite of pivots, some women just took a back seat, and we've seen in your batchmates women come back and build big bang careers later on. It was not about the college they came from. It was never about the education after a point. It was who they were. So who kind of gets to stay the race? What makes you stay the winning formula that you keep talking about? In her own way, she's telling us about this beautiful winning formula.
See, success comes at a price. True. Yeah, when you state that you have this ambition and you want to do well, a lot of times you've got to compromise and decide at various stages in your life that, what your priorities are going to be. That is where people fumble. You can't have it all the time. You can have it all maybe at different points in time and overall. But you have to decide, how you should have phases in life where you say, this is the time when my kids are young and I'm going to focus on family and work, but, not push myself and take those challenges. And then get back to a phase where, you're focusing on your career and say, okay, now I have enough support at home, my children are a little grown up and whatever. So you can't have it all. When people decide that, I'm going to have it all, then, or they struggle with the compromise, that I need to go back and have a hot meal prepared, and I want to please everybody, and all those kind of things. And I want to take only convenient options at work. Then you are kind of not leadership material, because that's what I've talked about in my book. They don't get into leadership positions because they have not focused enough on their careers. So you can't have everything.
But Anita, also I have a question about, we have a lot of women in India who might have taken that back seat for whatever personal reason, but now are maybe interested in rejoining or doing something, but don't necessarily have the wherewithal or don't know how to go about it. And we've got this amazing sort of, whole segment of women who are educated, qualified, and may want to come back in. What
So
does
there
one
are
say
enough-
to?
No, there are enough efforts being done
Okay.
to get these people in.
Could you tell us a little bit about sort of?
Yeah, I think the Tatas and some other big companies are running programs for a second innings. There are platforms like FlexiBees that help people, both companies and the women themselves to kind of, match the kind of jobs that they're looking for. There are other platforms as well who are, reskilling and retraining to reboard women after a break of a few years. So there are efforts, but I think you should go into it with your eyes open because the world has changed. You probably won't get the same salary that you left off at, but of course, there's time to make up because the choice is really do I start it all, or am I willing to kind of get into the race again and
But in
keep up.
in your experience with all the interviews and women you've spoken to, do you feel that women hold themselves back? I mean, are you getting that sense?
Yeah, and after a while they get very comfortable at home.
Yeah. In fact, I get really angry about the kind of salary cuts. I know for a fact I have a friend who took a 7-8 year break and then she went back and her salary might be 40% of market. And I have a problem with this. The pivots we make, should when she goes fundraising, should she be given less money because she had 3 kids, or that made her richer? And that's my problem. That why are women getting less paid if they're taking a 5-7 year break?
But that's the nature of the market, Jaya. I don't think we can fight that. I think that is the nature because, if somebody else has stayed, whether it's a man or a woman, I mean, are they going to feel okay if the other person has come in after a 5-7 year break and get the
In
same?
spite of upskilling, in spite of going through a second MBA.
Yeah, but you should be willing to
Do
take
you
on
have
that
to-
challenge. Why
yes.
is it only about money?
Yeah,
No,
correct.
it's not
Throwing
about
away
money.
your
I'm saying that
qualifications,
even
your
the
experience.
friend I'm talking about, she's now 5 years worked in the company, proved her point, but still somewhere the gap years are held against you.
But that might be
Because
an
the market's
individual.
also
So,
evolving
yeah.
so fast that,
But I mean, Aditi, you talked about being a handful of women in India in this space, in the hospitality space. Do you also feel? I mean, look, it takes a lot to do what you did, and of course, you had an amazing support network. Do you feel women are holding themselves back? I mean, we are. These are. You talked about your grandmother and mother and how they inspired you to kind of follow your passion for food. This is specific to food, of course, but even in other, do you see your friends? Do you feel like your cohort? Are are the women in your life? Do you feel they've sort of pushed held back or pushed themselves in their career? I mean, do you feel that?
I think that there is definitely a challenge, and especially a lot of my friends who've taken that, like Jaya said, that gap year or taken few years off because the kids were in their prime years of whatever, the growing years, etc., and didn't have that support, are feeling that hit, even though they're super smart, they still aren't being able to pivot in their 40s to really go into something new. I think there's also that fear, right, of putting yourself out there when you're that age. So I think it is harder, but I do see them also coping with that. But it's a slower process.
And as she said, 2-3 emotions that are in summarizing for me: guilt, fear of failure, and something you said, sacrifices. Nothing is built without sacrifices. Yeah. So you have to manage your own guilt. You can't be everything to everyone all the time.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's what I think, what I've learned in the last 1 year, that I've taken a step back from some of my social scene to build WLC because you can't be everything to everybody, right? And that's when I want to ask you, 3 kids, guilt. And FOMO.
It's a FOMO.
3 kids. And your guilt be flipped, that maybe you feel that, you would have wanted to do more with your career. And how do you balance guilt and sacrifice? This is a very hard one sometimes, and there's no real answers for it, and there are no right answers. So I really want to know, how do you navigate guilt and sacrifice in an industry which is midnight, known to be beyond midnight, yeah?
I think I'm also very spiritual. I'm very positive. I don't constantly, feel. Now I don't feel that kind of guilt. Maybe I felt when I saw a premature baby. It was a different kind of guilt. But now I've overcome that. Like it took me a while. I've overcome that. I think that, I've never had a problem with my health. I think that jerk of having the blood pressure and being able to, having to take a medicine every day, made me, it shook me. But I've overcome all that. And I think I've come out stronger. And now I'm just living for the day and the moment. So yeah, I FOMO and I don't want to miss out on anything.
And my question to you is, what advice you have for women who deal with this constant guilt when they're trying to build their careers, or maybe even choosing to sacrifice their careers for their children? There is guilt on both sides. There's no winning this story, right? So, as part of your research on your book, what advice do you have for women who deal with this guilt?
So, I think, guilt is universal for women. And it has nothing to do with the choices you've made, in the sense that whether you have children, whether you got married or not, whether you're successful or not. I think every woman struggles with guilt at some stage or the other. She talked about her son running the home. And if your home is too well run, because of support or because of other family members, even then women feel guilty because they feel redundant.
Right,
Oh,
right.
I
Yeah,
don't
there's
have
no
a role.
need
I
for
don't
me.
have a role because anyway the home is running. So guilt is to be managed. And a lot of it comes out of this thing about not being ambivalent, about being clear about what your goal at this point in life is. I think we are also very hard on ourselves. Like she said, Yeah, you have to be kind to yourself. You have to pat yourself on the back. And that is something I've learned, because even I was hard on myself, because if you are a perfectionist, then, you're never happy. You always think, oh, this could have been better. This has gone wrong. So pat yourself on the back and say, well done,
Yeah.
So we need to do that more often, and also surround ourselves with people who are more positive.
Right. Cheerleaders. We
There are
all
enough
need
people, there are
cheerleaders.
enough people who want to pull you down.
Correct.
So just have your set of cheerleaders. That's
And I think the biggest, I think, at least what I feel is, at least in my surroundings and, even sometimes in the leadership team, the men are always afraid of hiring smarter people, And for me, like, I'm not afraid of that. I love hiring people who are smarter than me, because, it's like, it's that constant learning at work. Like, you crave for that, and that's what keeps you motivated for the next best idea. And I think that's also, a value system that I've brought into this culture and this organization, is always hiring smarter people than who I am.
also, I feel, coming back to your guilt thing, a lot of times I say, how would a man have reacted in this situation? And then you realize that, you were just blaming yourself or being hard on yourself. A man wouldn't have done that. And so just by observing men and how they react, there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're ending a year and starting a new one. I want to ask all of you about one reflection, one learning from this past year, as well as, do you keep New Year's resolutions? And if so, do you have one for 2025?
I haven't focused on exercise this year, which is, I used to play a lot of lawn tennis. I've had a little bit of a paddle injury. I have a rotator cuff issue, and I haven't focused on even fixing that. So I think next year I want to fix myself on the health front.
Anita?
Yeah, so 2024 for me professionally was not a very active year, because we moved home and I had other family demands and things like that. So I'm looking forward to 2025, where I'll have a little more me time and invest in my own learning and things like that. I don't keep resolutions or anything like that, but yeah, that is one of the things. And I just joined a singing class.
Oh.
Yeah.
What kind of singing?
It's just Bollywood songs, but at 47 I started playing the keyboard, and now at 63, I'm trying to learn to sing just for myself.
Wonderful.
And so it's fun. I like to push myself a little bit every now and then to see how far it goes.
Jaya?
I think for this year, taking from what Aditi said, bring health at the center of things, and of course more discipline. I was recently at a detox, and I started finally waking up at 6 a.m. and that's given me the time to give myself 6 to 9 is about me in the morning, and I think that really sets you up for the whole day. So a lot of discipline, consistency, and focusing health, the rest just happens. Because the core of who I am, I'll build everything around. If I get this right, the health and morning discipline, I think I'm not so worried about the rest. And one of the challenges when you run a peer-led organization always is that how do you take people along? And I think I finally it's an art, and I think getting good at the form of managing that form of art and and the diplomacy of managing people at a peer setup. And I used to always reject as diplomatic. I don't want to be blunt and straightforward all the time. But now I'm learning it's a form of art, and as weapon, sometimes you can learn it. And it's not the word diplomatic can be seen as a negative word, but I think that empathy and love and compassion with a bit of firm hand, it can really go a long way. So that's what I'm taking on for 2025. And of course, she and I will be in the fundraising cycle together. We'll be raising capital together next year.
I'm right there by your side.
Yes.
For me, first of all, I have to say that Jaya, in my book, diplomacy is not a bad thing, since I am the product of that. But for me, I think 2025 is also about health. It's about, I want to improve my yoga practice. I've gone back to the mat after I always take a break and then, have this conflict in my mind about whether to, because once you're on the mat, you're really on it. So I really want to pursue, go back to the way I used to be with my practice. Even just about a decade ago. So that's important. I think WLC will continue to be a big part of my life. As my husband said, is this a full-time job or what? But I think for 2025, just to Aditi, you spoke about it. It's about just continuing to be positive. You know, the world, when you read the news, you just want to run in the other direction. So to constantly find joy in the everyday. And really having gratitude for just putting one step in front of the other and just soldiering on in life.
And I feel also like we just need to be excited about what we have.
Yeah, correct.
And grateful.
Yeah,
Grateful and excited.
Beautiful. And sometimes because of so much obstacles you have to constantly overcome when you're building, doing something new, then you get jaded. And I think just that reset, fresh, excitement, joy. How do you that's the big part of, and that's what yoga brings for you, health, the morning routine, that don't get jaded with life, because anything worth building requires a lot of determination and the excitement has to stay fresh. I think for you, I would say that for anybody building a new business, it has to be new romance every time.
Yeah, exactly.
It
is. It's so true.
Yeah, every year is first year of romance. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then we had some rapid fire. Yeah. A meal that best describes your philosophy. Meal or dish?
I think a pulao. You can make a really fancy pulao if you have everything, but you can make a very simple pulao if you don't have everything. I've always believed that, you've got to make do with whatever you have. And don't let whatever you can't do or don't let whatever you can't have or don't have come in the way of what you can do.
Aditi?
I think a thali, because it showcases generosity, and I think also makes you feel very hospitable, because you can keep showering the love by continuous service, and also the variety of the creativity you can showcase on a plate.
So this year I've gone to South a lot for detox, and I've been eating sadhyas on banana leaf, and I've been really enjoying it. And I'm serving one on Saturday for my wedding anniversary to very few friends. So I started really enjoying that whole banana leaf experience, the multiple dishes, the pickles, and the different kind of rice. So that's my one meal.
What about you?
Yeah, so like a thali, but on a banana leaf. Yeah. For me, I would say a salad, because like a pulao, it can be as hearty or as light as you want it to be. It can be as dressed or not dressed as you want it to be. You can put cooked ingredients in it, but also have it raw. And it's I've never met a leaf I don't love.
I need to go on that salad diet.
So a book recommendation for our viewers, a book that's really inspired you or it was very interesting for you to read?
I love Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara, and I think that it is a book that you should read if you're in any profession.
I like all of Khaled Hosseini's books, especially The Kite Runner, because they're so raw in their honesty. It really hits you.
I would say, so I'm reading Lionel Barber's biography on Masayoshi Son, the founder of SoftBank, and I also just finished Alok Sama's racy sort of memoir, working as the president of SoftBank International. And I think there's a lot of lessons one can learn from somebody like a Masa, both good and bad. I mean, just the way he was brought up, the kinds of life struggles he had. So it's immensely readable, both books, so I would recommend that.
So, two books that haven't left my shelf while I read a lot. One is a book called Same as Ever, and it talks about lessons from around the world. It's by the same author who wrote Philosophy of Money. And I keep reading that one chapter or two chapters on the loop. It's how humans never learn from our history, and every generation will make their own learnings from the start go. And that's why I love the book. The second book that I've been reading a lot in the last 4 years, literally every month, is Obstacle is the Way. In every obstacle lies an opportunity. It's based on Greek philosophy. It's by an author called Ryan Holiday. Amazing.
One quality every great leader should have.
Trust. I think if people trust you and you trust people, then I think it's a very strong weapon. And I remember a story that, Saurav Ganguly told us once what his biggest strength was, and really appealed to me, was trust. He said, even when I make mistakes, and leaders make a lot of mistakes, he said, my team believes that, I made it while trying to do the right thing for the team. So if you're in that kind of place, then it's great, because so many times leaders have to demand things from people without having anything to give back. And that's the time you encash on your trust.
Definitely.
I think for me, it's respect. And, I think it, especially in sort of the industry I am, I think that sometimes there's so much servitude, and, they're constantly like people mistreating, guests sometimes taking advantage of people, and, even the servers, etc. And I think that to constantly build that respect in people, and to keep, being empathetic towards them, and, putting them up there is always very important.
Right. So adding to both of them, I think one of the most biggest hidden talents of leadership is self-awareness. I think we're not aware of who you are, what are your values, and you can't lead yourself, you can't lead others. So being very aware, and I sometimes find leaders around the world just have no idea who they are. So without knowing who you are, you can't know the world. So that is a big quality.
Right. For me, I think it would be listening. I think as a leader, you have to listen. You have to listen to your people. You have to listen to those around you, obviously to your peer group. But I think it's very important for a leader to be accessible and to have that ability to listen.
And the next one is, what's one piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
I already mentioned that. I want to sleep. I wish I'd slept more.
What about you?
Less inhibition. Yeah, you miss out too many opportunities if you're inhibited.
I wish I had been less serious. I think youth is really wasted on the young. I think you spend your 20s and 30s all wound up in a knot because you're trying to figure yourself out and all that. Honestly, it does all fall into place eventually, but it's easier said than done. So I wish I'd just been a little less serious.
I think, yes, I would give my younger self an advice is that be less scared. There's nothing so scary out there. Overcome all your fears. I think we just build up these big walls around us, big thought processes, big biases, and a worldview which is not rooted in reality. And we create our own subjective reality. So if you let go of the walls of fear, everything is possible.
Okay, one thing you're excited for next year?
It's a roller coaster ride coming my way. I can already see it.
So that's exciting, the roller coaster.
Yeah, so there's a lot of learning coming, and I'm excited about it. I'm going to be learning a lot and building a lot. So I'm really excited about the learning and the building.
Aditi.
Well, we're opening a new bar. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah.
So are we.
I think my music is something new, and working with WLC.
Oh, yes, that's lovely. I would also say I'm excited for WLC, and I'm also just excited for what the year might bring. I think, so many unplanned things happen, and I think that, hopefully it'll be a sort of a year of great learning and unexpected adventures. Yes. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Well, thank you. Thank you both so much
No,
for
this
giving
was
us your
amazing. I
time.
loved chatting with you guys.
Yeah, the conversation was unexpectedly easy, and thank you for taking out the time and giving us a restaurant to host this play at this place. And thanks for your time. It was really lovely.
Now I have to host you for a meal.
Yes,
we have
yes. But I think we touched upon a lot of really important topics, mentorship, fundraising, inhibitions, guilt, leadership, of course, and, building and developing businesses. And of course, pivoting. I think career pivot, which I think we're all great examples of. So I think that's it's been a really meaningful conversation. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Thank you.